Next to Mavis is Dirk Volshank. Again, someone that is going to bring a very unique perspective to the topic. So Dirk and I, our paths crossed about 2 years ago when we at the Talent Pool first started really talking, heralding this topic. And what you're going to hear from Dirk is macro perspective from when he was behind the architecture of a national competency framework for the country that he hails from. And you're going to be hearing it from an organizational perspective from his time at Suncor. So, Dirk, take it away.
Thank you. Welcome from my side. Oh, this is good. When Jeff talked about working like a dog, I go like, We had 2 dogs. The one was the English bulldog. And I definitely don't want to work like, well, maybe I want to work like that, but I don't want anybody working for me like that, because that thing just slept, ate, and once in a while give a bark when it was hungry. So, perfect. The second one was a boxer. And that boxer was, I just don't want somebody like that around me, because you put down a beer glass, she would drink it. You put down anything that's edible, even if it looks like not edible, she would eat it. Your computer, charger, anything. So I went like, whew, that's interesting. And then the millennials. I like what you said. My background is I was a psychologist, worked in a clinical setup and worked with a lot of adolescents and issues. And I was sometimes wondering, who's the ones that changed? Because when I was young, I had the same thing. When I joined the company, I wanted to know where I was going. I wanted to be promoted to the CEO within 2 weeks. Wanted to have a Mercedes in the first 3 days, but it didn't work like that. And I saw it was an interesting experience, just to bring a little bit of a highlight on it. When I was a student, I bought my first Volkswagen, $90. So it was pretty shabby. Broke down, and I went back. We lived on a farm. I went into the garage, and I took the engine apart, and I had no money, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I look at this. My dad came in, and he said, "I wonder what you're going to do about this." I'm like, I thought you're going to do something about it. And I'm like, no, it's not my car. My buddy had the same experience the other day, and we were in his garage, and his son was working on his vehicle, and there was something wrong with it. And the dad really nearly pushed the kid aside and said, "I'll fix it." I'm like, oh, I wonder what changes. Is it the parents, or is it us as parents, or is it the youth? That's very different. Very interesting, just how we saw the same thing from different perspectives. But anyway, so today, my job is going to talk about competencies and more the mechanics of it. And the only purpose or thing that I can do today is I would like to provide you with a framework that you can utilize to assess competencies and competency methodologies and applications thereof in the workplace. Because if it's true what Nicole said, and we're going to go back and we're going to start using the competency methodology in our human resources practices and management practices, then at least you will be bombarded with a lot of information, and you need to be able to make an intelligent decision on whatever you want to do. Either, my experience is I can use competencies. Should it be a formal system, or should it be an informal system? It's interesting. I don't think there's a differentiation really in efficiency. It's how well and why do you want to implement. I don't need a really sophisticated competency management system to use it in my everyday practices as a manager. In fact, when I was in operations management, that was where I was first introduced in the fact of competencies. There was people that I hired that need to run a 24-hour shift, and they need to do it safely and produce some standards, or meet some standards of production. I was like, okay, how do I get these people to do it? And then I worked for Suncor implementing a really formal competency management system that I will show you some pictures on. So let's see what I'm going to do today. So the first piece I'm going to talk about whose business is competencies. Have you got any business with it? Yes or no? We're going to look at the paradigms around competencies. There's some interesting paradigms that I would like to share with you, and I would like to challenge some of them. The value of how we can define competencies. Is there any use in defining it in a specific way, yes or no? What's a framework that we can use? Is there a framework? Or is it just any, mini, miny, mo, here's a competency? What is the right level? I will give you an example how we use competencies as a basis to develop human strategies or people management strategies. Doesn't matter if you're in human resources or you're a line manager, that will be your work anyway. And then we'll quickly look at how to apply competencies in a talent management process. What is the value of competencies in there? Very practical stuff. Don't say you should do it like this, but at least when you start working with it, you can have some kind of framework that you can utilize for your work. The first one is whose business is it? And I'm not going to stay necessarily with that first slide, but do you guys think that you've got a business in competencies? It's your business?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I maybe clarify that for me. What do you mean by that?
That's all I wanted to know. I'll try to clarify my presentation on it. Anybody else who said it's competencies is not my business? Is it your business?
Yeah,
Why?
because you have to pull everything together to achieve what you want to achieve. And to do that, you have to look at everything 360. So you've got to be a stakeholder in that.
A stakeholder, absolutely. So let me share a little bit why I said it. I think it's the business of every person that's working with people in some kind of methodology, because there's different roles. As a line manager, my job is to actually get people to execute the job and be safe in it, and meet production standards or business growth standards, whatever. So I need to clearly understand, as a line manager, what's that competencies that make people effective. If I'm in human resources, which I for a long time spent, my business was to help the business to understand the process of identification of competencies, to implement the systems in order to utilize them in the different talent management practices. So if we do recruitment, line managers in 90% of the business is not developing recruitment systems. It was my job rather to bring them a system and help them to utilize the information so that they can make decisions. If I'm a consultant like now, this is my business, because I go and help organizations in order to implement focused people management practices so that they can be more productive. So that it's all our business. Depends on which perspective we've got on it. The paradigms of competencies that I bump into, it's a few interesting ones. Competencies are simple to define. Yeah, there's an interesting blog on LinkedIn that I'm part of, and we write a lot of things on competencies, and 90% of the people would come back and say, oh, it should be simple. I don't say it should not be simplistic. I do have a challenge about it's simple. i.e., if you go to Europe on vacation, and that pilot flying that plane, do you think he should have simple skills or pretty good skills? I want him to be having good skills. He should take me in a safe way to where I want to go. I don't think he should be a radio control pilot. He should be pretty good at it. Second one is competencies, tasks, skills, and curriculum are all the same thing. People are like, yo, you guys are so fussed about the competency. What's a competency? What's a skill? It's all the same. I will go into the conversation and help you to evaluate. I don't think it's the same. Because if we talk about skills-based recruitment that we talk so many times, it's skills-based and there's limitations. It's not competencies. There's something different in competencies. And we'll come back to that one. The third one is we are a competency-based organization. Now that is a very popular thing now lately, you will see. And my question always would be, I haven't seen a competency-based organization. I either seen a production-based organization or a construction-based organization. I've seen competency-based people management practices and processes. But I haven't seen a competency-based organization. So I always chuckled and would say, okay, so you're selling competencies if you're a competency-based organization? And like, no. I'm like, okay, good. Paradigm 4, competency is a competency and it's the same anywhere. And now it's a difficult concept to say what is transferability of skills and what's not transferable. Again, we'll come back to this one at the end of the day, or my presentation, I'll ask that question. And I would like you to have some kind of framework to say there are absolutely transferable skills. And there are sometimes not transferable skills. There should be certified skills and competencies. And how do we define the difference on that one? So we'll come back to that. Okay, when we say defining the competencies, really tricky. I started as a young psychologist, 1980-ish, when I bumped into this competency thing. And I was like, oh, this is simple. And I started reading my first article in cognitive psychology, and they talk about higher level skills and critical skills. And I'm like, gee, okay, I'm going to just quickly make a Excel spreadsheet, and I'm going to say, here's the hierarchy. And the more I read, the more confused I got, because people would say, this is a competency, some people say this is a competency, and it's just chaos. Some of the biggest minds out there try to define it, and there's really simple definitions, i.e., I think I've got one there, the ability to do a job. And then there's another one that I got there. I don't even think I should read it, but I read that one. It's a very complex one by Hurling. I read it and I don't understand it, and then I go back. And just for the fun, let's read it. Competency can be defined as displayed behavior with a specialized domain in the form of consistency, demonstrated actions in an individual that are both minimally efficient in their execution and effective in their results. And I go, okay, let me try it again. It's not working for me. And then you get something, and here's my whole appeal to you guys. Doesn't really matter how you define it. If you work with a construct, you should, when you implement it, it should work for you. You should be able to do something with it. And here's the one that I said. I said, for me, a competency is the integration of knowledge, skills, and attributes and cognitive abilities that consistently delivers a required result under defined conditions to a set standard. Now that's an interesting one. So I don't say skills are not important. I think that was the problem with the skills space and the whole concept of education. I think sometimes education is pretty important for some stuff. I want my pilot to, I need to understand what he knows about flying, not just this certificate. But for me, it's the competency piece of it is what I do with that information. Because I know people that's got a qualification that's doing nothing with their intellectual knowledge or academic knowledge. And I think I know people that's doing a lot with the same kind of knowledge and information. And what's the difference? Is how we integrate all that knowledge, skills, abilities in a very specific, unique situation to have a desired result. And that's where the competency piece is coming in, where we say it's a level higher up than what I think is just a normal skill. So here's a framework that I used when I tried to figure it out myself. I said, let's look at the hierarchy of sets of information, for instance, and why I would come back in my definition and show you why it's at a specific level. The lowest level of activity is I classify something when I categorize it. I see a banana and I'm hungry and I'm like, oh, I'm going to eat that. It's something to eat. It's a banana, I classify it, I categorize it as food, and then I form a hypothesis. And I said, if I eat this and I'm hungry, it will take my hunger away. Then I've got this next level, it's a skill or a task, and I go and I pick it up and I peel it and I put it in my mouth and I chew it, and that's a skills level. And then when I go to the next level, I think then I start coming to the competency level where I start saying, I cannot do it now. It would be pretty bad if I steal your banana and I start eating it while I'm doing a presentation. I need to do it during lunchtime, because that's when we eat food, and now I present, and that's two things that's really different from each other. And that differentiation and integration of the social knowledge to my hunger and the information about the banana, that's where the competency level comes in. And when I can really put everything together, I may get to the point where I say I do have a competence as a cook. Because now I know all this food, I know how to prepare it, I know when to prepare it, and I really, it's the highest level. So we'll use this information to say, when I look at competency models, i.e., and you're going to get exposed to it because you can buy it in a free market at this moment, you can be presented with a competency model with 300 competencies for a job. I'm like, is that a competency system? I don't know. I'm not sure. Let's see. We'll reason a little bit with it. Or the people come back and say, here's only the 3 competencies that you require. It was actually triggered by something, this statement that Jeff had this morning on a research that was done to say, here's the critical skills or competencies. And one is creativity. Again, we'll come back later on the situationality of a competency. Is it linked to a situation or not? Absolutely. Creativity is brilliant. But when I go for heart surgery, I want that surgeon to make 100% sure he's not too creative on my heart. He just needs to fix whatever he needs to do and keep me alive. It's when he's going down there and say, oh, I think we can use a little remote system to keep this valve open, and no. That's the IT guy who's doing the software that need to develop that for me. So I will look at that at one. So here's my definition. So why this definition? And I don't really care what is the words and the methodology, but there's for me certain usages in it. And that is, if I look at the competency, I need to be able to identify the person's behavior and a possible deviation that I can fix it. That's the only interest for me when I'm in a business is I need to understand what you need to do. I need to be able to evaluate it so that I can make sure if I give you this job, you will be able to do it, or if you can do it, how do I fix your inability to do the job? Because that's what we do in industry. And that's why I like that definition, because it tells me what needs to be integrated. The integration of the knowledge, skills, abilities, and attitudes. So there's some kind of integration there. If you can't do the job, is it because you have all the knowledge, you've got all the skills, but you've got an inability to integrate that information? Jokingly, I'm going to use my son. He just graduated with 2 degrees in economics and commerce. I still don't think he can manage his own funds. He haven't got that competency because he haven't integrated the logic of income versus expenditure. Because he thinks my income is part of his expenditure. That is a wrong competency. So I'm talking actually to him now and say, Dion, let's sit down. What's your budget at the end of the month? 0 from that now, you're done. So what else you do need to, be what you spend at the end of the day. Because he's got more clothes and shoes than I've got. I'm like, holy smokes. It's actually mine because I paid for it. It just don't fit me. So, or what's the product that the person needs to produce? Is it something that I need to, marketing or public speaking? Public speaking is not necessarily a competency. Public speaking by convincing people, so the person needs to get support for an opinion. That's the competency. It's not communication. I always chuckled when I'm like, communication is a competency. No, I don't think so. For me, it's a skill. It's when you communicate a clear message to get support for that message, then it becomes a competency. I don't talk about politics because I think there's a different competency in communications there. And what's the conditions that need to be met? Is it, and it's difficult. There's two schools actually in competencies that I bump into. And although it started in the States, the whole drive with McClelland at that time, when he published in 73 his article and saying, do not use intelligent testing for identification of potential, and he came forward with, if you get a sample of behavior, and I can measure that sample of behavior, then I can probably predict how good that person will be in demonstrating that same sample behavior in the future. And he said, using that as identification of the people's ability to do the job. And I was like, okay, so here's an interesting thing. You will see a lot of the competency models would have the philosophy of the foundation for the job. And that's the ones that would say there's 50, 60, 70 competencies per job, because they actually try to describe the minimum requirements of skills required for that job. The one that I'm more supportive of is McClelland and Boyatz's work, is where they say a competency, and that's why I said it's not simple, is to actually identify what is that specific value-added behavior in a job that person bring, how they uniquely need to integrate that information, knowledge, and skills to create a competitive advantage. And that's why if you look into some jobs where there's high levels of discretionary work means that I can, there's not real good guidelines for it, then creativity is, or the ability to creatively solve problems in a non-linear fashion, is probably more of a competency required for that role. And that's the one that just make more sense to me. Curriculum is there's 50 things that I need to know. It's not the competencies. Competencies we regard as the 5 to 15 really things that you need to integrate all your knowledge, skills, attitudes, and cognitive abilities to produce that very specific results that will provide you a competitive advantage. i.e., when I do marketing, what is the competency in marketing that the person needs to bring to the table that will give me a competitive advantage? On safety, your example on safety, they chucked out their safety program, and they focus only on competencies. The assumption is 90% of the time that the safety program will give me the safety competency. No. It was actually the perfect definition of a competency is the person started teaching his people to do a very specific job and integrate all the risks into that job. So that's really applied safety, because if I teach you a job and I teach you how to do that job safely and effectively, that is safety. Is when I do not integrate it, and it's not a competency when I teach you to do the job and then I teach you safety on this side. And we see that a lot of times in the workplace. Okay, so that was the definition. Let me skip on that one. That's a little bit small. But here's the framework. If you look at different frameworks, all that I want to share with you is I've had a very difficult time in the beginning to find out, here's this core competence, and here's this competence. I'm like, what's going on? And then I bump into a person many years ago, Terry Law. He worked for a company, and he was a line manager, and he was one of the guys that did a lot of work on competencies and utilization of competencies. And we started together, working together in this, and we said, okay, yes, it's a 360 degree on any job. So the first left-hand corner is the technical skills and competencies. It's what you do when you do the job. And it's not the numerical skills or the physics or mathematics. What I'm talking to the technical skills, if I'm a computer programmer, part of being successful in that job is I need to understand the different technical languages that I will use. So it's the technical piece, so always look at this. In able to do my job, I will have technical knowledge about my discipline. The other one on the right-hand side, regulatory compliance. That's where a lot of the jobs, there's a regulatory compliance, and I need to be proficient in doing that. If I run a company, I need to be able to make sure that I comply to all the legal aspects on financial reporting. On the left-hand side is very specific to the company. We know that in certain companies that project management is one of the examples. You can do project management, but if you go to Syncrude, you do project management in a specific way, and if you do to BP, you may do it in a very different way, because there's very specific application situations. And then the right-hand side, the orange there, is what do I do with myself? Personal competencies. We talked about the creativity, the ability to speak, and that kind of stuff. So if you look at the competency framework, my suggestion is just look and see how well that 360-degree view on the job is there in the competency model. If it's well presented, you can use it. Otherwise, you know, if it's only one-dimensional, check it. Levels of competency, my time is really short, but here's 3 things that I would like you to use when you evaluate competency statements, either if you buy or you use it. The 3 things is level of discretionary work. One is, and the simplicity there is, the level of discretionary work. The moment when I talk about integration of skills, knowledge, and abilities, there's a level of discretionary work that I imply by it. The higher the level of discretionary work, the closer to a competence is. And the definitions are on the material. When I see, you know, things like setting the best date for a monthly meeting or answer the phone, I'm like, for me, it's a task. It's not really a competency, because there's not a lot of integration of that skills, knowledge, and attribute. So discretionary work is one. The second one is level of transformation. Level of transformation is work where we add value to something. The simplest form is, there's a lot of ingredients, you put it together, mix it up, put it in the oven, and out came a Black Forest cake, which is a very scarce thing in my house. But I've got a wife with an incredible ability to use it, to demonstrate that competency. She just don't want to do it. But that's, for me, it's a lot of, there's a transformation. She do something with that, eggs and flour and stuff, that's just something very, very different. Now, that level of discretionary work, when you look at the competency statement and there's no reflection of that discretionary work in there, it's just a simple task like filing and making a photocopy. There's not a lot of discretionary work. And I'm not saying it's about importance, please. If I'm filing my tax receipt, making that photocopy is very, very important, and making the right one. Or filing a report, the incident report, when I'm doing an investigation on a safety incident that happened. It's not about importance, it's about what the interpretation in that report and the conclusion. That's where the competency comes from. And the third one there is a level of the cognitive processing that's required. If I really work on it and I need to process and integrate a lot of stuff, it's a competency. When it's just talking about one level of it, and I give you an example, it would be identifying compliance with the rule. I go and I do an investigation, or I do a certification on competencies, and I just look at the person and say, yeah, you can follow the rule. I think that's just a task. It's not for me a competency. The competency is, yep, this person can follow the rule in offset conditions as well, and therefore I think this would be a person that you can really use in an emergency response. That's the competency. Just making the statement a person can follow the rule, that's not a competency, that's a task. This one, I think my time is so short. It's just, yes, how we use competencies. When you look at the critical skills world, we've used the competency information. I must explain it a little bit. The blue line is we took one of the positions and we said, let's just look at the age distribution. And the blue line was age distribution, more young people than people in the late 60s or mid 60s, early mid 60s. We look at the competency line, which is a red line, and we said, So it's a younger people in the environment. Although well qualified, they may not have all the critical competencies. And our competencies were really loaded up at the back end. And we're like, oh, okay, simple. That's what we see quite often. What's my strategy as a human resources manager? What's my strategy? I'm like, oh, let's figure out. The yellow piece, I used the competency information when I did the assessment. I'm like, time to competency. I need to close that gap as quick as possible because that's my risk in my organization. People are out there, they're not well qualified. Jeff gave us an example of people that's well qualified, work safely, and if they're not, they cannot work safely. So step number one in that, if that graph is there, we use it to close competency gaps, training. The second one, we start using on that mid area, we thought, technical succession management. Think about that one and using it in competencies. We all talk about leadership succession, but quite often you don't talk about technical succession. What's the young, bright guys that I want to make sure that they become the really experts on some of it, and how do we do it? And then at the back end, where all the knowledge was, we identified the critical knowledge and competencies, and then that was part of our knowledge transfer and competency transfer strategy. So we look at this and say, here's some uniquenesses, and there's some unique information we need to transfer into the training material in a yellow block and to the people that's in the mid block there. And if you want to have a conversation on how we did this, anytime just phone. Here's the talent management process. Quick last comment on talent management process. If you work in organizations, you will see it's so often siloed. When I put out an advertisement for a job, the recruitment chappies come along and they, ask me a few questions, and I look at what's being published, and I'm like, oh, is that really the job that I want to fill? And then when the person get hired on, the orientation first, new hire orientation program is there, and there's all funny things in there that I don't think is relevant to the job. Then I do the training and I use different competencies. And what we try to do with the competency management system and framework is to say, no, if you standardize it in your organization, you can use that information in every talent management procedure. So if I know what's the requirements for the job, I know exactly, and it's well defined, I know how to use it in recruitment, I know to use it in onboarding, I know to use it for development, I know how to use it for performance management, I know how to use it for mobility management when I move people around. So that's one of the benefits if you start implementing it. There's also, you do it in a single discipline, you need to work with your colleagues to start getting alignment. This is my fun one. The question is a competency or a competency? Yes and no. Yes, the one. Surgery, competency. Well, there's two types of surgeries. There's a veterinary surgeon and there's a heart surgeon. When I go and I want to do something on my heart, I will definitely not go to the veterinary surgeon. That's where I take my bulldog. So, yes, I think there are very situational competencies. Although they're transferable, that vet can probably get into medical school, but there are certain requirements that I think it's important in certain specialized jobs. The lesser regulatory requirements that there are, or focused behavior, like somebody designing a web page, I don't really think I need a strong certification, but a person need to fix the right thing on my inside. I like certification on that. Then the other one is public speaking. Public speaking, probably a lot more transferable than what we think. And you can utilize it in marketing and all different kind of things. And then flying is the other one. I'm also a pilot, and I thought flying is flying is flying. No, it's not. When I go, as I said, to Europe, I would probably fly with a pilot that's got his commercial pilot's license and are familiar on 747s if that's what we're using. I'm a little experimental, bold plane, guy, so I've got a certificate in flying. I don't fly 747. So if I ever invite you to fly 747s with me, run like hell. It's not going to work. Although I do have a certificate, and I probably can fly it, but I will probably crash it as well. So, here's an interesting one. And I haven't got time to go through this, but that's a framework, just an example that I give you of an outplacement organization. The competencies in each one of those quadrants of an outplacement non-for-profit organization that we compiled for one of the organizations. So, you know, you go back home and you say, well, how would it look for my role? There's typically an example that you can use. So here's what my conclusion is. Competency definitions are not simple, but they need to be very useful tool. So part of why I think we do not have a competency framework and we don't use it, I think it's an economic issue. It takes time to identify exactly what is that critical skill. If I just got 1% of all the money spent worldwide on identifying what makes leaders successful, all the research that's being done, publications, training that's being done, I would never work in the next million years. Because it's not simple. It is pretty challenging to find out what is that integration that gives me of all this knowledge and skills in a person, what's that really product that makes me, my people successful. 2, competencies are a higher level of task, skills, and curriculum. I think it's when you put all those things together and you create my simplistic definition then, a better product than was there before. That's when you're competent or demonstrate competencies. Just demonstrate the skill. I'm not totally sure that's for me the competency. Competencies are standards. We use competency-related information in all our talent management processes. So, you know, absolutely, try if you go in an organization to standardize as far as possible how you define it and then how you use it in all the different disciplines. If you're a line manager and the recruitment chap shows up, say, hey, say, maybe I've got another competency model for my development. Let's see how this integrates, and then you can develop and we can go and recruit on that. And then competencies are what makes people successful, and there's a strong situational context in it, some of it. Although there's transferability in some of the skills, but there is also very situational skills, I think. Situational skills, situational competencies. That's it. That was a quick and dirty. Hopefully, you can at least use this now as a framework when you go out there and you work with competency material and people say, is this a competency? You can logically reason with it and say, maybe this is task descriptions or not, or if you want to use it in your talent management processes, you know, there's a framework. Any questions?
So actually, a good opportunity to ask questions of Dirk and also of the panel. You had a question, sir?
I asked, or you talked about the 360.
And what has replaced the 360 back in from 80? I did the 360 as well. Again, trying to implement, I'm going to say reviews of our employees more than anything else. Trying again to see where their strengths are and trying to, again, move them forward.
Yeah. Well, I think 360s are still used, but as far as competencies goes, and you guys can correct me, but self-assessment. So a self-assessment profile so that they can assess themselves and find out where do they feel they're lacking their skills, where do they want to go, and what do they need to do to get there.
Yeah.
So,
And in saying that, actually that's what we have started, is the same questionnaire we give to them to assess themselves, and then the supervisors assess that as well.
yeah, and well, I know when I did my 360 back then, I only focused on the administrative staff that I was supervising.
Right.
But now what you can do is have peers do it, you can have other supervisors do it, you can have everybody in the industry, or sorry, in the organization do it for that person, that particular person. And it gives you a better feel for how they are seeing that person and how they fit into the role and the organization as a whole.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'll use an example. I mentioned earlier the company that we're working with that's now 100% focused on what competent is. And so a key role now for frontline supervisors, foremen in the field, is these regular, like weekly conversations. And so it's not a 360 in the old sense, where everybody around you told you how good or bad or horrible or great or whatever you were. Now these things are turning into focused, direct, one-on-one conversations around very specific behavioral or technical skill sets and how we're going to work on them next week. So instead of being an annual thing, it's an ongoing, continuous development cycle for everybody in the organization.
So it's just-in-time feedback, in effect.
I would say all the time feedback. It's not just in time, it's all the time.
Yeah, and actually in our organization, our operations manager will come to us and just say, hey, you have a minute? And then she sits down, she talks to us, what's going on? What are you struggling with? Where do you see yourself going? How do you feel about trying something new? Okay, we like the way you're facilitating. Do you want to take on more facilitation? So she kind of works within our strengths. And I'd say that's kind of what I like about our organization is, it's not something that I started out doing, but now I'm doing it and I like it, and they're working within my strengths and my competencies.
And I'm thinking being results-based.
I don't know what everybody else's job is like, but in our business, we either do or don't. We're paid by each objective we achieve in our contracts. So you can say, you're very nice, I like the way you're working, but how many jobs did you find for people this week? Because bottom line, if we don't deliver the product, we don't get paid. And that becomes quite clear.
So in this case, it's outcome versus outputs.
Yes, we need to recognize the outputs, otherwise people lose motivation, but both. Yeah.
Dirk?
Just a little one on 360. That's my pet hobby, unfortunately. Very useful tool, but what industry did with it, a lot of us, and I look at the HR practitioners, which is us, who used that or suggested it. It's like we went to a dance, and we see this beautiful dance, we go to our own industry, and now we try to repeat that cha-cha. We just haven't got the same music. Because 360, there's a few important things. Became very unpopular, it was popular, unpopular, and now it's heavily criticized and heavily used. But what happened? People that can assess me, or that I ask a 360 feedback, it was developed in the Second World War by the military when they started running out of people that can take leadership in squadrons that's on the forefront. And they asked the people that was fighting, who do you think is your leader? They're fighting with those people every day, and they say, I will follow you. That was where the concept started. So people was qualified to do the assessment. And the assessment, or the stuff that was assessed, was very relevant to the job. That's what I see and saw in industry over the last 20 years. People started 360, but they don't know why they're doing it. So we ask people that's not qualified to rate people or give me feedback about stuff that's not relevant to the job. And then we're surprised that people say this is just not working for us. But I work with organizations on competency certification that still use very strong 360 feedback for technical skills, for work process skills, but then they select the people to be competent to do the assessment.
Okay. Other questions? Don't be shy. Yes, probably. Okay, so thank you very much, Dirk.